All right, welcome to the second video in this series of Getting Started with Java, Introduction to Java. In this video, we're going to cover the second bullet point in our objectives. This is interpreting a basic Java program. I would also like to just do a quick review over how to start up a Java program, how to compile it. I want to show you two different ways of doing that. So in our last video, we started with talking about the Java development kit. And what comes with that Java development kit is you have the JVM, which is the Java virtual machine, and then you have the Java library. It's pre-written code. And then there's some other tools that you can use to work with Java. So here's the program that we left off from in our last video. It's a simple program that basically just outputs hello world. We say system.out.println, and it just basically outputs to the console, which we have highlighted here. What I want to do is to start this process. So I want to show you two different ways of getting started with creating a Java program. The first way here is a very bare minimum approach where we're going to create a folder, and I'll bring that folder into my view. And the first thing you want to do whenever you're creating a Java program is to create a folder. If you do it in this particular method, I'm going to show you. So here, I'm going to right click, I'm going to create a folder. And I'll name this project Walkthrough. And I'm going to now open this project. But before I do that, I'm going to close out this project here that I have currently in my editor. All right, so this is, if you remember from the last video, this is my Explorer view. And the Explorer view is going to show you all of your code, all the files that you have within your project folder. And so I'm going to first close this one out, and I'm going to open the folder that I just created. So I'll say File, Open Folder, and I'm going to navigate to the location of that folder. I have it in a folder called Java Videos. I'll click on it, and I'll click Select Folder. So this is going to be a different process than what I showed you in the previous video. Again, this is going to be a very bare minimum approach to writing code and compiling, and only needing the necessary files within for a Java program. So in this case here, what I'm going to do is I'll create a new file here. I'll call this Walkthrough. And I'm going to give it the extension .java because I'm going to be writing Java code within this file. And then when I save it or when I click off from it, it'll open up in my editor. And at this point, I'm going to begin to write code. So I'll say public, which is the access modifier. It gives basically who has permission to access this class. And I'm going to create a class, and I'll say Walkthrough, and I'm going to give it the same name as my file, Walkthrough. And then whenever you're creating a Java program, you're going to always need, and in this case, a console application, you're going to always need a main method. I'm going to say public static void, and then I'll say main. And this string of arguments here is what we call it's basically it's a data type, an array of what data type called string. And we'll talk more about data types, but this is essentially a parameter that I'm defining that we can be passed into, or we can pass some information into this main method. Again, if this doesn't make a lot of sense at this point, we're going to talk more about modularization and different parameters you can define for your methods. But essentially, the string arguments here, the string of arguments array, is where you can pass data from command line into your main method. And I'll just say args, which is what you would typically see. Then you have the opening and closing bracket. And basically, this is the opening and closing to the body of the method. So what I have highlighted here is the method header. The public is the access modifier. It tells you who has access, and it's public to other parts of my program or to any other code in my project. Static, that it belongs to this class. It's static to this class, and it cannot be used as an instance method. And we'll talk more about that when we get into some more object-oriented principles later on in the class. Void is what is going to return from this method, and the name of this method is called main. And again, you must have a main method. That's the first thing that your program is going to look for when it begins to when you actually start up your application or you press the run button. And what I'm going to do here is just going to put a few statements here. I'll always put system.out.print line, and I'll just simply say hello world. And every statement ends with a semicolon, and I'll put another statement here. So the question I have here is, how many statements do I have within the body of my main method? If you said 2, that's correct. So this is what we call a single line comment. And then that's the first statement. And then here we have system.outprint line, and then we're passing in hello world as the string text. So that's 2 statements that we have in the method body of our main method. Now, just a quick note here. This is a single line comment. You can also do what we call a block comment, and we can have multiple comments on multiple comments on different lines. And that would be the example of a block comment where you use a /*, and this would still constitute as 2 statements. All right, so we have our walkthrough.java, and one of the things with using Visual Studio Code, you'll see that we have our code, but we haven't saved it yet. And so you always want to make sure you save it. And we're going to actually compile it into, we're going to use the Java compiler, which is a tool that comes with the JDK. And so if we look back to our slides, let's skip forward. We have the JDK, and within the JDK, when we downloaded the JDK, it came with the Java Runtime environment. And the Java Runtime environment consists of 2 things: the Java virtual machine, which is what allows us to basically take our bytecode and translate it into machine code for that particular operating system or for that particular computer. And we have the Java class library, which is just the pre-written code that's given to us by the developers of the language. And then we have the development tools. And you'll see that we'll make use of the Java compiler today. And I'll just show you how to use that to compile our code into what we call bytecode. And then again, this is from the last video where I just showed you that we have a Java file, and when we compile it, it's going to create this class file that contains the bytecode, and then the Java virtual machine is what's going to basically turn into machine code that our computer can then respond to. So jumping back to our code, right? Here's our program. Remember to press save. When you press save, it gets rid of that circle here. And at this point, we're going to bring up our terminal. The easiest way to bring up our terminal is you go to View, and you go to Terminal, or you can use the shortcut commands Control tilde, and the tilde key is right on most keyboards, just below the Escape key on your computer. So I'll just click here and say Terminal, and the type of terminal that you have, whether it's PowerShell or Git, and sometimes you'll see me use the Git Bash terminal. You can use either one at this point. One of the things I want to make note of is that I'm in the folder that I want to compile my class, or I want to compile my code, or compile the code within the walkthrough.java file. So you want to make sure that you're always within the folder that you want to compile your code in. And what I'm going to do here is everything is saved. I'll go ahead and say Java C, a JAVEC, or some people say it's Java, and the C stands for compiler. And then I want to type in the name of the file that I want to compile into bytecode. And that's going to be walkthrough.java. Now, if you have any errors or syntax errors in your code, it's going to, when you run this command, it's going to give you some feedback of some things you may want to correct or fix. But in this case, I think everything looks good. So if I hit enter, you'll see that it compiled, and we have this walkthrough.class file, right? So if I want to run that here, I just call Java, and I just give the name of the file that I just compiled. If I hit enter, there we go, hello world. So that's another way, and this, like I said, this is a bare minimum. We have the project folder called walkthrough. I have a walkthrough.java class. I have the bytecode that gets translated into machine code, and that's done through the Java virtual machine. And that's one way of creating a project folder. But in most cases, in this class, what you'll do is you'll create a folder. I'm going to delete this one here. Actually, let's close it in our editor first. I'll close folder. And then here's the view where we want to create a new Java project. And so if you went through the installation process from the last video, you should have access to create a Java project. So we create a Java project. We'll say no build tools. We're going to pick a location where we want to create our folder or create the folder for our program. And so I'm going to do that within Java videos. And I'll select the project location. So this is only selecting location. It's not creating a folder yet. So it's going to be in Java videos. And then here I'm going to give my project a name. And I'll just call this walkthrough 2. Now I hit enter. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to scaffold my application. And you see, by doing it this way, by using some of the extension tools, it's going to pre-scaffold my application and give some additional files within my program. So you have the VS Code, which is basically the configuration for Visual Studio Code, the library that's going to contain any of the additional archive jar files, and we'll talk about jar files a little bit later, and then the source code. And in the source code here, I have my Java app, and this is the same program that we ran, that we built at the start of this video, with the exception of the throws exception. So if we want to run this program, you just click play. It's going to bring up the terminal. It's going to compile the code into bytecode, and then you'll see hello world. And in this folder structure, you'll see that the app.class file is within the bin. And what allows that app.class file to be within the bin is through the configuration of the settings.json file. And so it's telling where to output the bytecode or the class file. Okay, let me just quickly, before we end this video, I want to quickly talk about just some of the things that we saw within that sample program. And so here's kind of what we've seen thus far. Public is the access modifier. Basically, there's a number of different access modifiers, and it gives permission who has access to this class, or who has access to this method of main. They're public, so anybody can have access to these, to the class or to the main method. We have the name of the class, which is hello world. In our case, ours was called walkthrough. This is saying that it's a class, and we'll talk more about class and what that means when we get to object-oriented programming. And then here we have our statements. And so here we have our print statement, a comment that says print hello world, and then we have this a simple output statement. And then both of these statements make up the body of our method. Later on, we're going to talk about packages, and then how do you import some code from the standard library that is given to us into our program so that we can use some of the functionality that the developer of the language has already pre-written for us. And we can import packages and begin to use some of the functionality within our program. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But nonetheless, I just wanted to show the basic structure of a program and give some definition to some of the things you see here. All right, in our next video, we'll discuss how to declare variables. We'll talk about something called escape sequences, and then we'll kind of flesh out some more things that will begin to make our programs a little bit more robust versus just the hello world. So stay tuned.